Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to unlock some secrets about the early church and how they dealt with leadership. Buckle up. It's more interesting than you think.
It is.
We've got this document. And get this, it's from a Catholic Orthodox dialogue group.
Wow.
They were trying to find common ground, right, on how the church was structured way back when. And you know what? It still matters today because those old debates still shape how different branches of Christianity do things.
It's so true. People picture the early church like this perfectly organized thing, like, some big company with a boss at the top. But it was way more complicated, and this document proves it.
Okay, so spill the tea. What was priority number one for them?
Unity. Communion. They were obsessed. They even used this Greek word, koinonia.
Koinonia. Sounds intense.
It was. It means like this super deep fellowship, sharing life together, not just, oh, we're in the same club. It was theological, deep meaning for them.
Whoa, so they saw this unity as reflecting the Trinity itself. They weren't messing around. This document, it focuses on the first millennium, right? Why that time period?
Exactly. Before the big East-West split in Christianity. Back when they mostly agreed on leadership and authority. It's like the foundation to understanding how things changed later.
Okay, so here's where it gets juicy for me. I always thought, even way back then, there was one main leader in charge of all Christians everywhere. But this document says, nope, totally wrong.
Nope. They're adamant that there wasn't this single, all-powerful leader, not even in a whole region, let alone the world. They talk about St. Ignatius of Antioch, who said, wherever the bishop is, bam, the universal church is present right there. Super local focus.
So the local bishop, he was a big deal. For everyone listening, think about how your own church is set up now. It's changed a lot, right? But hold on. If there wasn't this one big boss, how did bishops in different places even connect? Smoke signals.
Not quite. They had these regional networks, right? And the leader was called the metropolitan.
Ooh, fair.
But here's the thing. They weren't some kind of super bishop. They just happened to be the bishop of the biggest city in that region. Like first among equals,
So it wasn't about having the best robes or anything.
Nope. What's really cool is how much they stress synods. These councils where bishops would get together and hash things out.
The original church leadership meeting.
Right. Shared responsibility was huge. They even quote St. Cyprian, who called it one episcopate dot spread amongst the harmonious host of all the numerous bishops. They were in it together.
Teamwork makes the dream work, even back then. And it wasn't just talk, right?
No way! They point to Apostolic Canon 34, which straight up says, big decisions needed all the bishops on board. That's wild compared to how some things are run today.
Mind blown.
Oh.
But let's go higher up the ladder. This is where the big five come in, right? The heavy hitters of the early church. So was Rome already calling the shots? Were they the top dogs?
The million-dollar question. Yeah, you had Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, the five big C's, each with their own patriarch. And they even had a ranking called the taxis, with Rome at the top.
So Rome did have seniority, but was it more about looking important or actual power?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's messy. The East, they saw Rome as like the respected older sibling, not the dictator. They didn't take orders from Rome. And the document itself stays neutral on the whole Pope's authority debate, which tells you something.
Juicy. So how did these five big players get along? Constant competition.
Actually, picture this. New patriarch gets elected, sends out these letters of communion to the others, basically saying, hey, I'm new here, but we're on the same team. Unity vibes.
The ancient church version of a friend request.
Right. And to be official, the other patriarchs would add the new guy's name to their church's diptychs, these lists they'd read out loud during services.
Making it Facebook official, early church style. So they were connected, but still independent, like a theological social network. But what happened when big disagreements popped up? Who settled those?
That's where the famous ecumenical councils come in, and things get really interesting.
Even more interesting than ancient church friend requests. You've got my attention. Tell me more.
Okay, so imagine this. Bishops from all over the Christian world gathering to debate and hammer out the big questions of faith. That was an ecumenical council.
Okay, I'm picturing something grand, maybe a little chaotic. So were these councils just the Pope, making pronouncements? Or was it more like everyone gets a say?
Oh, it was definitely more dynamic than that. The Pope's agreement, super important for it to be official for the whole church. But it wasn't a dictatorship. These councils were about discussion, debate, not just one guy calling all the shots.
More like a team effort then, even for defining the church's teachings.
You got it. Take the Seventh Ecumenical Council, for example. They actually laid out rules for a council to even count. It wasn't enough for the Pope to just say something, right?
Interesting. So what did they do?
They needed symphonia, basically like a supermajority of the bishops agreeing. They also needed synergia, the Bishop of Rome on board, actively cooperating.
Right.
It wasn't about forcing a decision, but everyone working toward a real consensus.
Okay, so checks and balances, even back then. What else?
And don't forget the other patriarchs. The big cheeses from the major sees, they had to agree to for a council to be truly universal.
So many layers. It wasn't just Rome has spoken. It sounds like they were incredibly intentional about keeping the whole church united, even when they disagreed.
Totally. They got that unity wasn't about everyone being exactly the same. It was about knowing they were in it together with a shared purpose.
Powerful stuff. But let's bring it back to today. Why does all this ancient history even matter for us in the 21st century? What can we learn from how they dealt with power and leadership?
Such a good question. For one, it makes us rethink how we see leadership in the church now. It's less about I'm in charge, more about serving the community, keeping the faith strong.
Less boss, more shepherd kind of thing.
Exactly. Guiding, nurturing, sharing responsibility, not just top-down orders. And remember how important unity was to them. That wasn't some empty word. They lived it. And in our world today, so divided, that's a message we need.
It really makes you think, how'd they stay so united with all the stuff they went through? What's the secret ingredient, especially when it came to disagreements and finding common ground?
It's easy to romanticize the early church, right? But they had their share of drama. Conflicts, power struggles, just like any big group of people. The difference was they were committed to working through that stuff together, their shared faith, the idea of the church as the body of Christ, and held them together.
Less arguing online. More talking face-to-face.
Yeah.
I like it. It sounds like they understood that unity wasn't about uniformity, but about recognizing their shared identity and purpose.
And that's a crucial lesson for us today, don't you think? How can we, even with our different perspectives and opinions, hold on to that same sense of shared purpose? How do we find unity in all our diversity?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves, especially in our faith communities.
Yeah.
You've walked us through so much, from those local bishops all the way up to the drama of those councils. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to remember? The golden nugget of wisdom they can take away.
It's like the biggest lesson is that leadership wasn't about throwing your weight around. It was about serving, taking responsibility, and more than anything, keeping the faith strong and unified. They knew they were part of something bigger, something worth putting aside ego and ambition for.
Man, that's something we could all use a reminder of sometimes. We've covered a lot. For those local bishops to the ins and outs of those councils. But there's one more thing about early church leadership. We haven't gotten to the whole appeals process for bishops.
Oh, right. You'd think, being bishops, they were off the hook. Right. Untouchable. But even they had to answer for their actions if they messed up.
Wait, for real?
Okay.
Bishops could be put on trial. What was that like?
Probably not as dramatic as those courtroom shows, sorry to say. But the early church, they had ways of investigating if a bishop was accused of something and holding them accountable. They took that stuff seriously.
So checks and balances weren't just for theology debates. They had a system to deal with power trips within the church.
100%. And get this, if a bishop thought a ruling against them was bogus, they could appeal. But, and here's the kicker, it didn't have to go straight to Rome.
No.
Nope. They could appeal to another major see, another patriarch. Shows you, again, it wasn't all about the Pope being the ultimate decider.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening. The early church, it was way more complex, kind of messy even, than I ever realized. And you know what? That's kind of inspiring. They were wrestling with the same stuff we are. Leadership, power, accountability. Didn't always have the answers, but they were in it together, grounded in their faith, dedicated to keeping the church united.
And doesn't that speak to us even now? They weren't perfect, but they were all about leadership as service, being accountable, and finding unity even when they saw things differently. Those are timeless values, something we all need as we figure out leadership and community today.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes you think, if they could see the church now, what would they be stoked about? What would they want us to rethink? So much to ponder. Well, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the wild world of early church power dynamics. Hope you've enjoyed the ride.
It's been a pleasure, really. And remember, history isn't just dates and names. It's about learning from the past to make the present and future better.
Beautifully put. So to everyone listening, here's something to chew on. As you go about your own life, in your church, your community, wherever you're in charge or part of the group, what can you take away from this idea of sharing responsibility, making decisions together? Think about it. Until next time on The Deep Dive.